If you let me know if you see it coming through.
Yes, I see it.
Okay, and then we'll start letting people in. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Great to have you here yet again. I will spotlight myself as well as our guest for today. And as always, we'll just kind of let you all start filtering in here for a minute before we really get things rolling. But yeah, exciting to see you all once again. I'm actually coming to you as I sent out an email about this past couple of days. I'm coming to you from Barcelona, Spain right now. Just came in today, a little bit jet lagged or a lot jet lagged, as most jet lagged as you can be the first day. And and I'll be going to a concert to see Chano Dominguez, who's been on the show previously as well. A wonderful flamenco jazz pianist, and hopefully get to hang out with him a little bit while I'm here. Um, we will get started with the show here momentarily. We start a minute late, so it's probably just about time to get our intro going and get everybody up to speed on what's going on here. If you're joining us for the first time, you might be seeing us out there on Facebook, on YouTube. We're actually now experimenting with Instagram and Twitter as well with our streams. And if you're seeing us out on those streams, if you check the chat, we'll actually share a direct link where you can register to join us on the Zoom call if you did want to jump in Zoom and have a more personal experience here. We are open to questions and engagement from you guys, and happy to do that. Sometimes people just want to watch and listen. That's fine too. But feel free to jump in and join us. I will give an introduction to what this program is, though, in case it's your first time and you want to hear what's going on. So this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. And what we do here is we gather every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting edge instruction for piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour for just $16 a month, get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as archival recordings of over 200 episodes now in our member area. You can join Piano Tech Radio Hour at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. We've got some other things to plug. I'll just briefly say, make sure you go and check out the podcast, pianotechradio.com. Check out our Substack, Piano Technicians Masterclass. .stubtech.com, our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, at Piano Tech Masterclasses. And then also check out our Action Geometry Masterclass we recently had with Dean Rayburn. You can find out more about that on our homepage and our upcoming masterclass we'll be having in May as well. Now, without further ado here, I'd love to introduce our guest for the day. Her name is Tiffany Poon, and she's a trailblazing young classical pianist born in Hong Kong in 1996 and now based in New York City. At just 9 years old, she moved to New York to join the prestigious Juilliard School pre-college division on a full scholarship, studying under Yocheved Kaplinsky. She continued her education at Columbia University through a joint program with Juilliard under the tutelage of eminent pianists Emmanuel Ax and Joseph Halligstein. Tiffany is an extensive and varied international performance career, having debuted across North America, Europe, Australia, Asia. Notable venues include Carnegie Hall, Steinway Hall, Kennedy Center, Sala Mozart in Bologna. Highlights include her debut with the Rundfunk Sinfonie Orchestra Berlin and a sold-out recital under the Dresdner Music Festspiel. Her debut album, Diaries Schumann, released in February 2024 on Pentatone, has been a resounding success, topping Apple Music classical charts across 4 continents with over 2.3 million streams. Offstage, Tiffany is just as impactful. She's built a vibrant YouTube community of about 325,000 subscribers, sharing her musical life to demystify classical music. In 2020, she founded the charity Together with Classical, which champions classical music education and community through various initiatives. Tiffany, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Hi, nice to
Great.
see the names and in gray boxes and a few faces here. Hi.
Yes, yes. Um, if anybody wants to share your camera as well, you're always welcome to do so. And we're also open to comments and interaction in the chat. I wanted to jump in here first off, Tiffany, and kind of talk about those early days of being a young pianist, making a transition from Hong Kong to New York City, and I'm curious, like, what your recollection is of what that felt like in terms of, evolving as a musician, and did you foresee the type of career direction that you might have at that point?
No is the short answer.
Okay.
This is how I got started, was these four keys. And
Okay.
I was just very obsessed with trying to match the tonality or the pitches with not the piano yet, because I didn't have a piano at age 2, which is when I had this. It's also a xylophone, but I wasn't interested. Actually, can you even make any sound from this? Oh, you can. Oh, I never like hit on that, but I was more interested in the keys and the fact that you can make sounds,
Mhm.
and the sound can match the CDs and the records and vinyls that my father was playing, because he was quite an audiophile and played all kinds of music, not just classical, but like opera, Chinese opera, rock, English rock, pop, everything. Like I was looking back at footage, and apparently I was singing along to Whitney Houston. So like I had musical inspirations in the house, but it was never like, this is your career. It was a toy, and it's still a toy. Now it's just a sculpture. Um, but that's how I started. And I just like to play a lot with my fingers. So like I love to just tear pieces of paper apart, and then I would roll it up and pretend that it is a grain of rice. And then I would have a pretend supermarket and tell my parents to go shop in my supermarket, including grains of rice from paper. And yeah, that's kind of how it started, was just games. And eventually they thought maybe spending 2 hours trying to match four notes from a toy is not uh, the maximum potential of my exploration with this object. So they decided that I should try to take some piano lessons, because my dad would also bring me to music stores, and I apparently looked like I knew how to play the piano, even though I did not know how to play the piano. So I was very good at faking it. And so eventually I faked it all the way to New York. You're on mute.
Thank you. I said, as we all do, as we all do, gotta fake it all the way to New York, I suppose. Um, yeah, you're missing out. We had a previous co-host of the program, David Anderson. He passed away a couple of years ago at this point, but um, the spirit of that kind of a comment, I think, shines through with what we've always talked about here. But I think I was also curious about your sort of the integration of the two spaces there. Have you been in New York ever since you were 8 or 9 years old, or has it been kind of like a back and forth thing? Did your family move there? What's the relationship between the two places for you?
My mom's quite a saint, because she gave up her job to take care of me. So I auditioned when I was 7, I got in when I was 8, but I didn't have enough time to really transition over my parents. It would have been like 5 months if I had started Juilliard pre-college at 8.
Hmm.
So they decided to defer 1 year to prepare. And my mom gave up her job. She was a flight attendant, and she moved with me while my dad stayed to work in Hong Kong, and we would fly back and forth. So this like duality in me was basically there at a very young age, because
Hmm.
of this traveling back and forth during school breaks to see my dad. Luckily, my mom has benefits with flights, so that I flew very cheap for like 10% of flight fares to then be able to travel so much back and forth. But yeah, that was That was I would not say that I would want to relive that period of time again.
It was complicated. Do you consider yourself a New Yorker? And if so, when do you feel like
I think I'm
you would
rude
have
enough to be a New Yorker, so yes.
rooted enough to be a New Yorker? Okay. I lived in New York for a while. I live in generally in Chicago, but definitely lived in New York for a while.
Did you
And
enjoy New York?
I love New York. I love New York.
Yeah.
I just love that it's everything. It's just everything is right there. It's the
Yeah.
good, the highest and the lowest, and it's just all, it's all right
Yeah.
there.
It's very diverse.
Yeah, I love diversity. Um, I visited Hong Kong one time. Actually, so we have a piano tuning business in New York. It's called Floating Piano Factory. And I would, as over the years, I started the company sort of training some other technicians how to do the work, apprenticeship program. And then throughout the years, that was maybe, 2010 or so. Throughout the years, people reach out and they want to do mentorship. Oh, you do apprenticeship. Can I get involved? And sometime around 2015, 2014, 2015, these two young ladies from Hong Kong reached out to me. And they said they wanted to do an apprenticeship. And of course, it was kind of a bit of an extreme case. Like I couldn't really, I think their dream was I was going to sort of ship them out to New York and, teach them the ropes and things like that, which didn't materialize. But we did build a virtual relationship, and I did do some mentorship of them remotely, and then I actually ended up going to visit them in Hong Kong.
Can
Um,
you mentor me? Can you teach me how to tune?
yeah. Oh, you got your tuning hammer right there, of course.
What's your first okay, so you do call it a hammer because sometimes I call this a hammer and then people are
Yep.
like, "No, you mean a tuning pin, right?" But so you do also call it a hammer.
You could
Is it a
call it a,
hammer or is it
wouldn't call it a
a
pin. I would call it a tuning wrench or
tuning
tuning hammer.
wrench?
I'm trying to think if there's another word for it,
Okay.
but I'm forgetting. Tuning
Uh,
hammer, or tuning wrench. But you know why it's called a hammer?
because you can hit somebody with it.
So we just had a
I mean,
master
it looks
class
like
on
one.
we just had a master class on harpsichord maintenance a couple of months ago, and the harpsichord tuning hammer is much lighter weight because it
Mm.
doesn't require as much tension on the strings. They're much lighter, but it actually has a shape more like a T, and one side of it has the part to grab the tuning pin, and the other side of it is
Mm.
actually a hammer
Ah,
to
right, the
hammer
tuning
in
pin.
the
It's the
tuning pin.
pin inside. Duh. And
Yeah,
also somebody said tuning lever. Thank you, whoever
lever.
you
There you
are,
go,
Joshua.
lever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's like little mini and yeah. So
yeah.
what's your first tip then? Especially for pianists, because I'm sure that technicians are annoyed sometimes with how little pianists know about pianos. So what do you wish like somebody would know about?
I think, well, no, so there's one thing about what you would wish and another side of what you might wish that you knew about. So I'll answer both questions. So
Okay.
I think piano technicians and tuners wish that pianists knew more about just the general complexities involved, like they didn't just show up acting like it's this really simple process. Um, Voicing is a very useful thing, both for us to have about and for you to know about. Regulation is another thing. So understand like how the mechanisms work, understanding how the action works and those type of things. And then when it comes down to things that you would appreciate knowing about, um, voicing is very useful because it really helps you produce the tone out of the piano that you want if you understand what's possible there.
You mean
And
aside
then
from stabbing it and putting some sort of I forgot what it is called, some sort of
we
chemical
put
for it to
lacquer,
soften.
right?
Yeah,
A
lacquer,
hammer
that's it.
hardener. Oftentimes it's for hardening, but you can also do softening. Um, the other thing is aftertouch. Do you know what aftertouch is?
Yeah, of course. I had a discussion where I don't want a lot of aftertouch, and the technician was like, "How can you not have aftertouch?" I'm like, "Well, I play on the surface, I guess," and they were so confused.
But you do
So my
need
piano has very little aftertouch because I like to make all um the smallest detail, the
repetition,
tones.
right?
Yeah, like I
Great.
like
Yeah.
very direct, close to the strings kind of sound, so that I get the most impact and get to control that. So I like the extremes, if that
Do you
makes
know what the
sense.
technician's definition of aftertouch is?
I don't know. I'm not a nerd
So
in
that would
piano
be, so
tech.
remember that these are some of the things that would be useful. So there's a mechanism called the jack, which you might be aware of. And the jack
Yeah.
pushes up on the hammer knuckle, and then it pushes the hammer towards the strings, and then
Hmm.
it lets off from the hammer knuckle. So it's sort of pushing up on the knuckle, and then at some point it kind of shifts out and lets the hammer come and drop back down. And the after touch is what happens after the jack escapes from underneath the knuckle. And that's
Yeah.
just those are kind of useful things to know. So there's
I
my
know
short
it
answer to
in
your question.
theory. I know it in theory, but for me, what matters is like how it feels. So, yeah, sorry, I couldn't give you a definition of the mechanical stuff. I was never good at like physics. Were you good at physics? Is that how you got into, or like science stuff, mechanical engineering stuff? Is that how you got into tech?
I'm a piano player. I play jazz piano, and I guess I like the math and science and side of things as well. But yeah, that's it. It all comes together there.
Jazz equals piano tech? That's a first. Because I feel like jazz, you can improvise and you can change a lot of things. You know, you're kind of breaking the rules, whereas piano tech, it's a lot more technical. So
Yeah,
maybe it's like
yeah,
a contrast.
yeah. I mean, don't ask me about anything that you could put a label on, because there's too many things going on for me. But
Okay, sorry, I don't want to
yeah.
stress you out again.
Um, All right. Well, that's actually a good segue. Tiffany noticed I was stressed out before the program trying to figure out which recordings we might play of hers actually. And it would be useful to hear a little bit of something. And we definitely agreed that a bit of Schumann might be nice, of a recent performance of yours. You've got an album coming out. And
It came out already.
yeah, sorry, you got an album that's out now. And yeah, and it's
Did you like it?
focused on Schumann. It's beautiful. Yes. I think you've done a wonderful job. Let's play a little bit. So be
Thank
here you
you.
play, and then we'll talk a little bit more. Just give me 1 second and pull that up. Make sure it's looking good. I'll make sure I share the sound and whatnot. And if anybody has any questions as well for Tiffany when we come back, or wants to join the conversation, feel free. All right, let's get over here and share that one. And guys, let me know if you having trouble hearing anything or seeing anything, but we'll start here. We're just gonna play it and we'll talk about it afterwards. Come on now. Let's do this. Play. Let's give it a good start. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Really appreciate it. Um, Can
Thanks for
you,
playing it.
yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that particular piece and also, you know, the album and why you chose to record the songs that you did?
So 2020 was a lovely year. Um, I I knew that wanted to play music because there was a lot of attention on the internet. Everybody's, separated and just connecting over the screen, and that bugged me because I am a pianist first. I'm a musician first, and felt like I didn't have the space to show the music, not as a visual. And so I had the idea to do the album in 2020, and very quickly I knew that this would be the first track on my album because it's my first album since forever. It's my first official album with a label, and I've never done something like this. And I knew I wanted to make a statement that really showed who I am today as an artist, as a person, and it came out of an existential journey, crisis, whatever you want to call it. So it started in November 2020 when I decided to pick this piece to record on my album. Of course, it's a collection of 13 different scenes of childhood. That's what the title translates to. And I wanted to make an album that is kind of like a Bildungsroman, which is, like a book that tells the story of a young person growing up. And I picked Schumann as my composer for the kind of debut album because I've always really appreciated German Romanticism and philosophy. I studied philosophy at in college at Columbia, and I wanted the music that I record to encapsulate different aspects of myself. So thinking of my childhood, thinking about what is ahead and what I stand for. And I found out that Schumann also had a philosophical aspect to him. He was a critic. He wrote articles and reviews of music and was very much against sensationalism. And at the time in 2020, until now even, I see a lot of kind of like MSG content where it's like a lot of flashy things and very oversaturated content and sharing of things. And I wanted to record music of a composer who had the same aesthetic values as I do. And yeah, that's how I recorded another set called the Dances of the League of David, which is his little secret society that's trying to fight against the Philistines of music. And yeah, so that was how I came up with the album.
Wonderful. And how's it been so far? Like, are you fine? I know I'm assuming you have an existing audience that has kind of grown out of on your online presence, and I'm sure that people that sort of resonated with people. They wanted to check out the album, brought them in on the process and things like that. Any interesting uh, revelations or surprises about, who's checking it out or who's interested or who it's resonating with?
Um, I think I've just been very grateful and really happy when I see messages from people who are like, "Oh yeah, I checked out Schumann because of you," or because I kept
Hmm.
putting the music in the background of my videos all the time, and it got to the point where people were like, "Stop it!" I was doing that for like 3 years, and but for some people, they would come up to my recitals and be showing me the score of one of the pieces from my album, and I just love that I'm able to introduce classical music that might not be the most famous ones, like, maybe a lot more people would know Beethoven and Chopin, but Schumann, I think, is quite underrated. So I'm just happy that people show their support for my album. They helped bring it to number one on some charts, um, and then somehow I landed the attention of one of the top managements in classical music. And so it's been a whirlwind. I think I've settled now because I am now in the new phase where I've got big debut recitals happening, and it's because of the, I guess, reception of the album. There were
Hmm.
some good reviews from the establishment, and it's been I owe a lot to Schumann, let's just say that.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, it's beautiful to hear about that. And we're as part of this program, this program really just started as like something almost specifically for those piano tech nerds, like literally just the people that tune the pianos and fix the pianos. And we've been growing and expanding lately, and of course having a lot more musicians on. And I think it's great to also have the opportunity to myself learn and also bring more attention to what's going on in classical music. There's a lot of wonderful things going on, and there's a huge world of things to learn about as well. So I appreciate you
What's like
sharing that.
what's some musician's insight that has influence? And I this might be a question to whoever's watching if they want to answer in the chat, but like what's something that's influenced your line of work as a tech?
As a piano technician, a musician's insight.
Yeah, from hearing, rambles from musicians.
Well, we had an episode. The first thing that comes to mind is we had an episode of this program. It was a few years back now. I think it was during the pandemic. Eric Chu. Um, he's right now, I think he's on faculty at Carnegie Mellon. Um, and he joined one a technician. So one of his technicians, he works with several technicians in various situations, but he joined his technician on our program, and they talked about pedaling, specifically the shift pedal, and like dealing with the nuances of the hammer grooves in the hammer and treating it as a sort of a musical device, which many folks don't even really get a chance to think about it that way. The shift pedal is thought of kind of like a binary type of thing, versus his way of thinking about it is if there's grooves in the hammers, which some people have preferences of how deep they are and all of these different parameters, but if there's grooves in the hammers from the strings, how you can actually use those grooves to create a graded sound at different levels of the shift pedal, how far you shift it. That's the first thing that comes to mind when you say like something, a musician's chattering, like something that's occupying a musician's mind. And he brought that to the table. And yeah, it was very interesting. He had a whole lecture on it at that point. But yeah, does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, no, I'm now trying to. Well, first I needed to think for a second which one is the shift pedal. But also, yeah, I think sometimes I wonder if technicians understand what the musicians are asking for in the piano because if it's like on the opposite side, and when you're making sounds from the piano, there are certain things that you look for that maybe if you don't make music you wouldn't think about. So yeah.
Yes.
I've met all
I
kinds of tech personalities, some who are very nice and who actually knows of your organization,
Mhm.
and then some who are kind of halty. So I've met like all kinds of
Takes all kinds,
characters.
takes all kinds. Yeah, I feel like it is very so we have some really genius people in our community that don't play well at all they're not much of a musician. Not to name names and then call them not a great musician, but it comes to mind there's a guy named Del Fondrick, and he's a piano designer, and he's one of the very few. There's not a lot of people who actually design pianos and think about things like that. Surprisingly few. But yeah, I was asking him, hey, do you play? And he's like, I don't really play that much, but he's really great at thinking through how to structure the instrument and how to make it perform, thinking about the different parameters, thinking about it in a scientific way, and a kind of an engineering mind. But I do think generally it really helps to be a pianist and a piano technician because you can really bring those two things together. It would be hard for me to imagine if you don't really play the piano to try to put together the type of sound that a pianist wants, just dry, right? Without really understanding what they're dealing with. But I think that's one of the biggest themes that's important about for a piano technician that's dealing with musicians is that we speak different languages, and it's really the technician's job to learn how to translate between the two languages. But I think it's also if a musician wants to, sometimes they're not forced to as much because it's not the central component of their job, but speak the technician's language, so that we can communicate better. My best conception of it so far I think a number of technicians have put it this way, is that the performance is a collaboration between the musician and the piano technician and the piano manufacturer, right? If everybody doesn't come together to
The instrument.
make the the instrument, do what it needs to do, then it doesn't happen, right? So I think that's a fun way to think about it. Um, I wanted to ask you about your nonprofit organization because I found it really intriguing and check that out. And I know you're doing some podcasting around that too, which I love that kind of domain as well. Can you tell me a little bit about how that even got started and what it is for people who aren't familiar?
That also started in 2020. 2020 was a year of introspection for me and analyzing things and thinking and daydreaming. Um, I was very, very lucky during that time when my concerts were cancelled and right when my career was just about to take off, I got halted as many other artists did, but I had the support of a lot of patrons, so I didn't have to luckily worry about basic living expenses and things like this. And actually, there was a lot of support for me to the point where I actually felt bad because I knew that colleagues of mine were struggling. And I think earlier in the summer or spring and summer, I was doing fundraiser concerts for the medical field. And I did one with for Dr. Zell Borders, and then I did another one for other charities. And I realized that I didn't really realize it. It was more the audience showed me that they are willing to support these fundraisers, and I raised a lot of money to help others, and I wanted to redistribute the support for me to my colleagues. So that's how I founded Together with Classical. That was one aspect of it, was fundraising for people in need. And the other aspect was also with classical music, and I'm sure piano techs might have a different perspective and a different puzzle in the whole look of classical music, but I've always felt like you only get to hear perspectives from people who are like famous or who have won some awards or who has done something very, very professional, and you don't really get to hear the perspectives of everybody else that's involved in the tradition of classical music, whether it's a very passionate listener who just likes to engage with classical music in their own way, or you might not hear the journeys of students who are trying to make it into classical music, or maybe somebody that's an amateur trying to explore on their own. You kind of just know of classical music from the public side. It's like a very elitist, only reserved for a small group of people kind of music, when in reality, actually, it might not be the biggest, but there's actually a lot more diversity in the people who engage with classical music that just don't get the spotlight. So I wanted to highlight the different perspectives through podcast, and so that's how I got Classical Chats started. And I've interviewed people who have won Grammys, like famous violinists, and I've also interviewed high school students who are trying to audition, or maybe they're building robots that compose, or maybe they just like to play every day in the morning because they like to, and they actually have a different job. It's kind of just trying to widen that look of classical music, and that hopefully people can relate to different aspects, and not necessarily think that it's a very unapproachable genre or culture.
Hmm. Yeah, I very much appreciate that. And I feel like you know, this particular program that I'm doing here is kind of taken on a life of its own, to put it that way. I started doing this online education stuff back in 2017 before the pandemic. I know the pandemic kind of threw a lot of people's lives in different directions, especially with this online stuff. We started doing this program really just to support the technicians that were out of work. Like you can't work, you can't go out there, you can't go to people's houses and tune their pianos. Um, and it's evolved since then. I think one of the themes, that I keep coming back to is promoting the value of the acoustic piano just in general. Yeah, because I'm sure you probably notice it going out there. Um, some people don't even really know that they exist anymore. I mean, like people ask, "Oh, what is that? Oh, you need to tune those things." Like people know very little about it, and it's really just 100 years later from a period of time where it was the centerpiece in someone's living room, you know. But I think that there's a connection there with classical music, like not as much as other domains of music, like pop music, modern music, things like that, where the acoustic piano plays such a central role. People playing classical music on keyboards is a thing, but typically if you're going to do a performance of um, any high level, you're going to do it on an acoustic piano. Can you share a little bit about how that integrates with what you're talking about, like the acoustic piano, the value of classical music? Why does it matter? Why do you need an acoustic piano sitting there in front of you? Why aren't you just practicing on a keyboard? What's the difference?
I actually had a question for you because for me, I understand why people gravitate towards digital. It's cheap. Like this is a very expensive instrument, and
Hmm.
it's many digital keyboards, and I'm very, very lucky to have had the support for this.
Hmm.
But it's hard to explain to somebody who does not have the experience in listening to details, because with this is an old piano. And for me, it is so different from a new piano instrument because there's even more overtones, and it's a very feisty instrument so that you wouldn't get the same colors and gradients and nuances and all kinds of things in between the notes, in between the tones on a newer instrument. With digital, it's even more limited. But unless you've seen the possibilities and I can actually recognize the possibilities, you would be very happy, and I'm happy for people who got into piano through the digital because it's at least one way into the music. But it's kind of like lo-fi or like budget headphones versus high-end headphones and speakers. It's like if you know, then it's hard to go back.
Hmm.
But in order to get there, you of course need to be somewhat financially supported in some way to get to know the luxury. And but my question for you was, what is your opinion on potentially a controversial topic in the acoustic tech world, but um, on self-playing pianos,
Opinion? I mean, I'm
like this clavier and I think I saw another system on was it Schimmel or something that also had this. A friend showed me a video once of this, but also
yeah.
like Steinway Stereo. Do you think that emulation is the same? I think they
I
say
mean,
like
I
2,000
don't.
variations or something per
Yeah.
key. I don't
I
remember.
mean, um, well, I'll say this, like, yeah, I don't work a lot with the vintage player pianos, but recently acquired one, and we talked about it in this program. It's actually this cute little 64 key pianola. It's got
Is
the
it the one
piano
where
rolls on it. You pump it with your
you
feet and
pump
all
it
this
with
stuff.
your air? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like you said, those things run on
It was
air.
so cool. I remember I was invited to actually I would love to go there again. Um a viewer of mine on YouTube invited me to Amsterdam a couple years ago to visit a pianola museum. And it was just
Oh yeah,
all kinds of player pianos, and
yeah.
man, it was fun. I think back then they didn't have gyms, and so if they wanted to go on a
What a
stationary
workout.
bike, they just play the piano.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think nowadays with all the access we have to digital, which just makes a lot of systems a lot simpler, that somebody said, "Hey, let's create 88 little tubes and make this thing run on air." It runs on air running through 88 little tubes. It's crazy. But like today, nobody would even think of that. Be like, "That's a bad idea. Let's not do that. It's too
No,
complicated."
they'd just be scrolling on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. But regardless, it's such a cool thing. And it was technology in the day, and it is cool and it's interesting and it's unique. And so my perspective on this stuff is, you know, I love create human creativity and I love technology. I love new technological development. So for me, for like the concept of a player piano is interesting just from the very fact that you could do it. That you can program a piano to do this and that. You could replicate what somebody plays. I'm probably a little bit more interested in what level of the secondary level of creativity that it brings, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, I could replicate Tiffany playing something on the piano, great. What could Tiffany compose, because she has this new tool of this sort of like digitally, run piano or play or whatever. So I'm interested in what are the next level things that these new technologies bring, not necessarily what can they reproduce, which we already do. And so I do find it interesting. It is also, there is a bit of sadness, involved in like, hey, let's learn to play the piano. Let's play the piano. Let's have someone over to our house to play the piano. I think is part of also what I'm trying to do with the program here is bring musicians on, performers, talented people, and spotlight them and feature them because like maybe somebody that lives two doors down from you, I don't know where you live, but let's pretend you live in like a condo high rise. Somebody lives doors down from you, has a stereo piano player system, and they turn that thing on, and then you're over there in your apartment playing alone or whatever. What if they were just to invite you over to their house to play their piano? Come on, like, what are we doing here? I think there's a lot of talented musicians who are just they're underexposed. People need to hear what they're doing, and they need people to hear what they're doing. This needs to be part of our culture again. It's kind of like falling out of everything's digital, and the human connection side of it's a little bit faded. So I
Do you
appreciate the
think it's
fact.
underexposed?
Yeah, I do.
Because everybody can expose themselves by just filming themselves and posting on the internet.
Yeah, but it's different than come on over to my house and play. Let's play the piano. Let's sing a song together or something. You play, I'll sing.
I feel like maybe no one comes to your apartment to play. I've seen that it with some of my friends. They just gather around and they sing along and play. So I've seen those, but it's kind of like in conservatories. I think maybe like people gather
Yeah,
around in a
I
practice room
think,
or studio,
yeah, I think for
just
the
hang out.
most part, musicians might be doing it, but for the most part, people are turning on Netflix when they're bored and,
Mm,
they're checking out something on the computer or on their phone or whatever. I do think
mm.
there could be more of it, and also more of it to the general, right? Yes, you have these creative enclaves of people who are doing stuff like this, but I think that it could be spread farther and wider. That's kind of my opinion. Um,
Well, if you're ever in New York, I'll come and jam.
all
You can
right,
teach me
sounds
some
good.
jazz.
Sounds good. Um, what else did I want to? I wanted to get to. Can I? I hesitate to ask, so you might say no. I was going to share a short clip of a video of you practicing this Rachmaninoff Third Concerto. I believe this is from a while ago. Do you mind if we share that real quick?
Oh, sure.
Let's
I
do
I
it.
will say something very mean after, but okay.
Okay, great. We'll just go for it. I think part of the reason I just want to share this is to give people a sense of, um, what you're doing as part of your channel there. Well, you guys can see my screen, right? Let me just make sure this is optimized. And we'll just play, I don't know, we'll play like a minute here. That's muted. So the reason I wanted to share that is for a few reasons. One is because you didn't want me to, and you could explain why. But
I know you chose all the videos I didn't want to be presented, but it's fine, it's out in the internet and it is what it is.
so what I think is there's a couple of different things interesting about it. One is that, you know, part of what you're doing as part of your channel there is like sharing your practice sessions and routines. Like you're bringing people into the journey of a classical piano player. And I think, those things, my association with those practice times are just somebody alone in a room with nobody else there. There's nobody to share it with. So I think that's kind of interesting. We actually that portion of the video is towards the end of the video when you actually kind of get through something that you're practicing the whole time. I think it was useful to share that so people could also just get a sense of the wonderful technique that you've developed. And this is an older video, so your technique continues to develop. But you can catch a little bit of those comments in there of like, okay, this time I got it, or here we finally got things together. But tell me about, I guess you can say more about what you don't like about the video, that's fine. But can you share a little bit about what you found interesting about this connecting with other people through this audience and bringing them into this journey as a musician, which I think a lot of times is a solitary type of thing.
Well, so I think that video is very outdated because one, I don't make videos like that anymore, and two, I think everybody does it now, and it's just not interesting. Because I think how it started was I was studying philosophy and I was in this aesthetics class, and these authors were talking about the influence of technology on art and how we interact with objects and how we interact with art. Like at the time, photography was just starting to be developed, and what is your interaction with the reality of life through a photo? What are you experiencing through a photo, with a photo, as you're taking a photo, as the object or the subject of a photo? What are those perspectives like? Are you, in present time? Are you in a different time warp existence? And I was thinking about how we interact with classical music because the human was really what was being discussed in those aesthetics classes. It was, where is the human in this form of art, whether it's a painting of a scene, or maybe it's an imaginary scene, or maybe it's a photo, maybe it's a film, how you tell a story, and where is the human through that whole process, and from the making of the film to the viewing of the film. And I was thinking about, where's the human in classical music? Because if you think very just generally, it's a lot of the music, of course, now the canon is expanding, but if you think somebody off the street, classical music is music from long time ago, and a lot of the composers have passed. So the human is not even there, and what keeps it current is really the musicians who are playing it. Not to say that one's more important than the other, but in terms of the human, where is that, and who are people listening to classical music connecting to, and what aspect would they connect to? Is it the composer? Is it the artist? How would someone get into the music if the human is not even there to bring them in the way that a pop singer can, because they're currently living in the same time? And so that's how I started this hypothesis of, what if I showed more human aspect of classical music? Can I then bring more people into this genre that people might not necessarily listen to? But if they can just connect on the and relate to human aspects of my interaction with music, then they might just kind of check out what it is that I am interested in, because they connected with, let's say, my coffee habit, or whatever it is. Maybe it's a quality, maybe it's because I do something over and over again trying to get a certain perfection, and maybe they're perfectionists themselves in their own line of work, and maybe they connect with that energy. So that's how it started. And with this particular video, why I don't like it is because I did not know that Rachmaninoff Third Concerto is known to be the most difficult concerto. I had a performance at the time that I was preparing for, and this was a genuine moment of my process, but it kind of blew way out of proportion, because I did not expect, like, oh, Rachmaninoff Third is the most difficult, and therefore everybody will just flock to this video because it is a sensational thing to be practicing a very hard piece of music. Like that was one aspect of why I don't like it. And second, it's because it's completely separated from everything else. The way I filmed that video was just, I turned on and I was in a practice room, and that was it. It's like, all you know about that person on the screen is she is obsessed over one passage of music. And that in a way is very dehumanizing, because it's not what being a musician is. It's not playing the same thing over and over again. That's not classical music or classical musician. I mean, I know a lot of people practice a lot more than I do, but still, it's only one aspect of what it is to be engaging with classical music and to be playing classical music. So that's why I don't like that video, because it's completely gone out of proportion and kind of reified. It has its own separate existence from the original intention. So yeah, that's my little spiel. But people
Fair enough.
still talk about it, and I understand. I think it's just they only understand part of what I was trying to do, and it is what it is. But yeah,
Yeah, I
I thought
appreciate
about
what you're
taking it
sharing.
down actually. I thought about
Yeah.
taking it down, but then people were like, no, don't take it down. So I was like, okay, fine, I won't take it down. But yeah,
Well, I
that's my
appreciate what
little
you
spiel.
well, I appreciate what you said. Yeah. Yeah, I think about
It's
that too.
like if a piano technician, all you see of that person, if you want to introduce the whole world of piano tech, and all you see is them turning the lever, that's it. You know,
Mm,
over and over on just one note. That's it. You don't, know about them as a person with the whole world of piano tech and all the mechanisms and the complications. You only see one thing,
yeah.
and then that being like that's who you are. All you do is do this. It's like the Charlie Chaplin in the assembly line. You know, you become that.
Yeah, I hear that.
So
I
yeah.
mean, I think that so some of what you're saying, I think it brings up some things that are interesting to me. I don't know if I can't tell if it's actually same thing you're talking about, just something that it made me think of. But one thing that made me think of is I've ever since I was learning to do creative things, play piano, write, whatever, perform, um, you know, at first it wasn't obvious when you're a young person, at least in my world, that you didn't just start out being good at something. It wasn't obvious that you're not either good or bad. Like, oh, that person's a good piano player, and every time they sit down at the piano, it's going to come out great. That was not obvious to me that was not true, right? And so discovering that, my idols, be it like jazz musicians like Miles Davis or Bill Evans or, Herbie Hancock, started somewhere where it wasn't that great. I was actually enjoyed knowing that. And I think ever since then, I've have an appreciation for the sort of non-performative, I wouldn't call it just non-performative, but non-performative, non-polished aspects of everybody's creative process. So in some senses, I've noticed that sometimes I'll enjoy something that's early on in its development process almost more than something that's polished. When that's polished and it's finished and somebody perfected it, I'll be like, okay, sometimes it kind of bores me. And I want to hear somebody, especially somebody who's just getting started and there's that kind of awkwardness, sort of nervous around it. I find it enjoyable to witness that moment because I find that to me one of the more magical moments of the creative process when somebody's working on something, putting the
Oh
work
yeah,
in.
it's like when I saw some like footage of Glenn Gould's session recording or something, and I don't know if he would. I feel like he would be turning in his grave if he knew that his like outtakes are now like on a CD box and like published. I don't know how he would feel about that if he were alive today, but yeah, I know I understand the kind of intrigue and the humanizing aspect from knowing that, oh, not everything is perfect, and that definitely was part of the intention. I think it's just if you only separate one aspect, then it kind of just becomes its own thing separate from the original.
Indeed. Well, we'll have to wrap up here soon, just because we are time constrained by this program. We try to keep it to an hour. Um, I see a comment here in the chat, Claire, who says, thanks, Tiffany, you are an inspiration. I agreed.
I wanted
It's
to
really,
find this emoji, but I couldn't find it, so here you go.
thank you. One of the members of we have some techs on our team and we meet on Zoom, and Justice seems to be the only one that can do this, but she'll make the heart sign and then hearts will start showing up in the background of her Zoom call. I don't know how
Wow.
she does that. But I don't know, must be some setting or actual magic that you have.
There are
But
also like different ways to make hearts now, so I don't know which one
hmm,
Zoom will recognize, and so
it
I don't.
recognizes this one, yeah, so somehow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
Um,
know.
but yeah, it's been wonderful to have you. I appreciate your unique perspective and your willingness to join and sort of, bring yourself to the table here and be open with us about your process. Um, I want to make sure that people know, where you want to send them to, be it to learn more about you or to learn more about something else that you're interested in or um, online or offline. Would you like to leave people with before we roll
Well,
out
there's a
here?
bunch of people watching on Instagram, and I see a comment from Miguel. So yay! I'm glad that you are inspired to play piano. I don't know. You can Google me. You can decide where you want to follow me. If you want to know where I'm playing next in a concert, you can download my app called Do Re Mi Classical. That's a side project that I've been working on that I haven't really blasted to the world about, but yeah, or listen to my album if you feel like listening to some piano music and having an existential journey along, if you feel like it, or reflecting on different moments of life with me through my album. That's about it. Or you can check out my charity to give classical. We have a YouTube channel that has different videos, including podcasts and animation videos on music. And yeah, or
Wonderful.
just have a great day.
Have a great day. That sounds good. Um, well, I'll walk us out of the program here. I feel like there's one more thing but I was wanted to share or mention, but let me just check my notes real quick so I don't miss anything. I think we covered, the basics. There's clearly we could talk about more. Yeah, I think we covered everything. If I think about it, I'll mention other things. I'll do our outro here just so people know what they've been through and how to continue to join us in the future. Um, just give me a second to bring that up here. This has been a Piano Tech Radio Hour, and it's been a wonderful musical journey here. Thanks to Tiffany Poon for sharing this time with us, as well as all of you who've come to join us live, or maybe you're out there on the socials. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. If you joined us today by just signing up for this session individually, make your life more convenient, subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, just $16 a month. Get access to today's recording in our member area, automatic registration for each week's news session. Sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. And, just remember some of those things I also mentioned up front. We have a podcast, pianotechradio.com, our blog, pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com, our social media at Piano Tech Masterclass, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And we've got a masterclass coming up with Eric Johnson, The Final Mile, how to really optimize a fine piano, how to take it really to the top level that you can. And Eric Johnson, by the way, I was forgetting his last name earlier. He was the one who came on with Eric Chu to talk about pedaling, which is a really great session that they came up with together. But yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us today again, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks, Tiffany. We'll see everybody later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.